the 9th year of my tangled relationship with Jack Thompson, during my birthday celebration, his lover suddenly barged in, declaring they were soulmates and pleading with me to agree to a divorce so they could be together. Jack stood by indifferently, waiting for me to deal with his unruly mistress as I always had. But that day, I felt an unshakable exhaustion. Smiling faintly, I excused myself to get some fresh air in the garden. Jack likely assumed I had gone to shed tears in private. But when 1 hour, then 2, and finally 3 hours passed without my return, he began to search for me himself. In the garden, all he found was a burnt-out cigarette and my wedding ring. That was when he realized I wouldn't be coming back. By the 5th year of our marriage, Jack had started an affair with Luna Baker, a beautiful ballet dancer. I heard that Jack had been captivated by her ethereal dancing, likening her to a fairy under the moonlight. He treated her like a precious treasure, guarding her from the world, including me. Luna confronted me during the party, her eyes red with accusation. She bluntly claimed that Jack no longer loved me, and that binding him with marriage was cruel and unfair. I responded firmly, saying that Jack and I shared genuine love, and she should respect that bond. Luna cried, playing the role of a pitiable victim, as though I were a villain keeping her from happiness. Her behavior struck me as absurd. "You call this love?" I asked. "Falling for someone else's husband is disgraceful." My words left her visibly pale, but she wept harder, claiming, "Yes, I fell in love with a married man, and it's pathetic. But my love isn't wrong. I just want to be with Jack forever." Her declarations were naive and laughable. Yet Jack found her vulnerability endearing. He gently wiped away her tears and softly reassured her. "Don't worry. Be good and don't cause a scene. I'll stay with you tonight." His words shocked everyone, including me. For the first time, he openly sided with his mistress in my presence. Jack had always been protective of me before. In the past, when others tried to drive a wedge between us, he would personally retaliate, warning everyone that Emma Wilson is my wife, and no one messes with her. Yet now, Luna had disrupted my birthday, and instead of reprimanding her, he ordered his secretary to escort her home. Approaching me, he murmured, "Don't worry. I won't let her act out again, but don't do anything to her." His tone was a thinly veiled warning. I didn't respond immediately, which made Jack frown, his gaze turning cold. "Emma, Luna is young and doesn't know better," he added, making excuses for her. "I understand," I interrupted, nodding. Jack's expression softened, and he reached for my hand, but I instinctively pulled away. He looked displeased, but I simply smiled faintly and said, "I'm going outside for some air. Come back soon. We'll cut the cake together," he replied. His eyes lingered on my retreating figure, but I didn't glance back. Outside, a light drizzle fell, the scent of damp earth filling the air. I lit a cigarette, and as the smoke curled around me, I was reminded of the day Jack proposed. It had rained then too. We had met at 3, fallen in love at 16, and by 23, Jack had built a successful business. On one knee, he held out a ring and asked, "Emma, will you marry me?" My hands trembled as I accepted. "Will you love me forever?" I had asked. Without hesitation, he promised, "Forever." At the time, I believed him wholeheartedly. But by the age of 27, Jack had begun seeing someone else. When I discovered the affair, he had knelt before me, tears streaming down his face, begging for forgiveness and promising change. Yet once there's a first betrayal, others inevitably follow. Now he no longer bothers to hide it, and I no longer argue. Years of turmoil have hardened me. I know Jack will never divorce me, not for Luna or anyone else. Divorce would entangle him in complications he wishes to avoid, and he's certain I won't push for it either. I've asked for a divorce before, first out of heartbreak and later out of defiance, but each time it ended in nothing. This time, though, I felt an overwhelming weariness. The cigarette burned down to my fingers, making me flinch. A waiter approached me hesitantly, saying, "Madam, Mr. Thompson asked if you'd return to cut the cake." I blinked, coming back to my senses. After a pause, I stubbed out the cigarette and replied, "I'm not going back." The waiter conveyed my message to Jack, whose expression darkened. Guests nearby murmured, "She's probably upset. Jack, why not go comfort her?" Jack felt a flicker of guilt. He had grown up with me and knew me better than anyone. He realized his earlier words to Luna, promising to stay with her, were thoughtless and hurtful, especially on my birthday. "Did she cry?" he asked the waiter, recalling how easily I teared up over sadness, happiness, or even a tragic movie. But the waiter shook his head. No, Mrs. Thompson was smiling. Her smile unsettled him. "What kind of tantrum is she throwing now? She's too old for this," he muttered, masking his unease. Hours passed. 1, 2, 3, but I didn't return. Jack's frustration grew, and he headed for the garden thinking, as the wife of the Thompson family, walking out over a mistress is ridiculous. The guests must think she's making a fool of herself. But when Jack reached the garden, there was no sign of me, only a smouldering cigarette and a discarded ring. For the first time, it hit him. I wasn't coming back. "I'll teach her a lesson," Jack thought to himself as he strode toward the garden. But when he arrived, the space was deserted. A light rain fell softly, and near the trash can lay a burnt-out cigarette and a ring. Jack's chest tightened. The ring was the silver one he had used to propose to Emma. Over the years, he had showered her with countless pieces of jewelry, but she cherished this simple silver band as though it were priceless. Yet now, she had discarded it carelessly. She no longer needed it. At that moment, the rain intensified, drenching Jack's shirt and leaving him chilled to the bone. But it wasn't the cold that unsettled him. It was the realization that Emma was truly gone and wouldn't return. When I reached the villa, I immediately contacted a lawyer. He began methodically analyzing the division of property, his approach calm and professional. After all, this wasn't his first time assisting me with a divorce, though the attempts had always ended unresolved. This time, however, my determination was unwavering. I wasn't backing down. As time passed, my phone rang. It was Jack. He must have noticed my early departure and wasn't pleased. When I answered, his tone was frosty. "Emma, what exactly do you want?" I gestured for the lawyer to pause and responded evenly. "I want a divorce." On the other end, Jack's breathing hitched briefly before his tone softened. "Is this because of Luna?" I didn't reply. Misinterpreting my silence as confirmation, he exhaled audibly, his voice turning placating. "Emma, she shouldn't have disrupted your birthday. That was her mistake. I'll have her apologize to you right away." Even now, Jack refused to let go. He still believed my anger revolved around Luna. It was laughable. "Jack," I interrupted calmly, "this has nothing to do with anyone else." "Then why?" His voice wavered with frustration. Because I don't love you anymore, I finally said, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time, I spoke the truth without hesitation. Though a trace of sadness lingered, it was overshadowed by a sense of freedom and clarity. Jack fell silent, the sound of his fingers tapping the table faintly audible through the line. After a pause, his voice dropped to a colder register. "Are you throwing a tantrum again?" I was all too familiar with this routine. Every time I confronted him about his infidelity, Jack would look at me with an air of fatigue and confusion. "Emma," he'd say, "you've had access to my money and shares for years. Those women are just distractions. They don't threaten your position. You're my wife, and you'll always be my wife. You already have everything you could want, so why make a fuss?" He often dismissed my emotions with comments like these, comparing me to the women around him. "Look at them," he'd say. "They work tirelessly and earn less in a year than the starting price of one of your rings. What more do you want?" Materially, I had nothing to complain about. I lived a life of luxury that many envied. Even when my father admonished Jack for his behavior, he would smile and gently advise me, "Let it go. Don't dwell on it. Focus on what you have." I understood his reasoning, but I couldn't quell the bitterness in my heart. What once bound us, our shared history and love, had become a source of resentment. Outwardly, we appeared close, but in truth, we were distant. I cried, I raged, I demanded divorces, all in hopes of rekindling his love or sparking his regret. Instead, my lover had become my adversary, and the love I once felt had twisted into something darker. During my most anguished days, I finally understood the saying, "Love desires life, hate desires death." There were moments I truly wanted to kill Jack, and then end my own life. I once told him this, expecting fear or remorse, but instead he asked matter-of-factly, "Why didn't you succeed?" Stunned, I didn't respond. Jack smiled faintly. "Because that day you called me Ava. The name Eva was a treasure to me. My mother passed away when I was young, and my father, raising me alone, gave me the nickname. Jack adopted it too, often calling me Eva in our youth. I remembered the warmth in his voice as he held my hand on country paths, urging me to hurry so we wouldn't be late for school. On our wedding night, he kissed my forehead tenderly, whispering, "Ava, I love you." When my father passed, Jack held me close, promising, "You're not an orphan. I'll take care of you." But somewhere along the line, Eva became Emma, and our bond unraveled. One night, in a fit of despair, I got Jack drunk and pressed my hands around his neck. Through hazy, alcohol-laden eyes, he saw my tear-streaked face and asked softly, "Ava, why are you crying? Did someone hurt you?" His words caught me off guard. In his drunken state, he had forgotten his betrayals and only remembered his love for me. When I told him he was the one causing my pain, he panicked. "I'm sorry, Eva," he stammered. "Tomorrow, I'll take you to Uncle Lee's for roasted sweet potatoes, okay?" In our childhood, Jack would save up to buy those sweet treats for me, though he'd only eat them if I insisted. Back then, we were poor but happy, and his eyes, full of vulnerability, always melted my anger. That night, he looked at me the same way, and I couldn't go through with it. I let go, untied him, and walked to the rooftop, contemplating ending my own life instead. But just as the thought formed, fireworks burst into the sky. Their brilliance illuminated the night in dazzling reds, blues, and pinks. As I watched, the desire to die ebbed away, replaced by gratitude for the fleeting beauty of life. Snapping back to the present, Jack's voice on the phone pulled me from my reverie. "Do you still want to kill me now?" he asked seriously. After a pause, I answered, "No. It's not worth it." Jack refused to agree to the divorce. His decision had nothing to do with love or emotion, but rather our entangled interests. Divorcing me would disrupt his life, affect the division of assets, and jeopardize his business. As a shrewd businessman, Jack wouldn't take actions that undermined his own success. So, like before, he ignored my request and the divorce papers sent by my lawyer. I didn't want to be tied to Jack any longer. I instructed my lawyer to inform him that if he refused to agree to a divorce, I would take legal action. After packing my belongings, I left the capital city. Just as the plane was about to depart, I received a message from Jack. "Emma, you know how critical this moment is for the company's IPO. Why are you still arguing with me after all these years? Did it really have to come to this?" I stared at the message for a moment before replying simply, "Yes, it has to." The flight was bound for Iceland, where the Atlantic and Arctic oceans meet. I settled into a seaside town where I could hear the crashing waves the moment I opened my window. To the south, amidst lush green fields, I found the iconic red house often used for vision tests. It was real. The grass swayed gently in the breeze, and the landscape was breathtakingly serene. I joined a guided tour group led by an Asian woman who not only fluently introduced the local cuisine, but also provided detailed explanations of the landmarks. Among the group was a young couple who were inseparable, their relationship radiating harmony. I once caught the boy practicing his proposal repeatedly in private, evolving from clumsy to confident over 3 days. Finally, beneath a shower of rose petals at a Roman temple, he nervously knelt and said, "Gia, will you marry me?" Though he had rehearsed countless times, his voice shook with emotion, but his sincerity was undeniable. Gia's eyes welled with tears as she smiled and said, "I will." Cheers erupted as she slipped the ring onto her finger and leapt into his arms, the two embracing as though holding the entire world. On the ride back, the boy busied himself organizing their belongings, while Gia sat beside me, her fingers gently brushing the diamond ring. She noticed the faint mark left by my own ring and blinked curiously. "Were you married, sister?" she asked. "Yes," I nodded. "How old were you when you got married?" she asked eagerly. "I've just started working, and I wonder if it's too soon to accept his proposal." Her eyes sparkled with a mix of hope and apprehension. Hope for her future with her beloved, and fear of making the wrong choice. I thought back to my own past. I had once believed love could conquer everything and married Jack with that naive conviction. But over time, I realized that love can also bring unbearable pain and countless tears. My marriage was a failure, leaving me feeling unqualified to give advice. Instead, I simply said, "I got married at 23. I'm 32 now, and I'm preparing for a divorce. Marriage isn't about age. If you love each other, stay together. If you don't, part ways. It's that simple." She nodded thoughtfully and hesitantly asked, "Did you divorce because you stopped loving him?" With a faint smile, I replied, "Yes, we grew tired of each other." 7 days after I left, Luna finished a performance, and Jack personally came to pick her up. On the drive, Luna scrolled through short videos on her phone. She came across one where I said, "I got married at 23. And now, at 32, I'm planning a divorce. When asked, "Did you stop loving him?" I had replied, "Yes, we simply grew tired of each other." Jack froze at her words. Though the woman's face wasn't visible in the video, he recognized my voice. His chest tightened. How could I claim to no longer love him after all we had shared? It felt absurd to him. Jack knew my mother had passed away, and my father had died just days before. Other than him, I had no one to rely on. Over the years, I had mentioned divorce countless times, but Jack had always believed I was bluffing, a tactic to draw his attention. He couldn't believe I genuinely no longer loved him. A heavy sense of unease overcame Jack. Pulling over, he ignored Luna's confusion and reached for his phone to message me. Opening our chat, he saw his previous text asking when I'd be home had gone unanswered. I had told him to leave everything to my lawyer and not to disturb me. Deciding to ask where I was, Jack typed a message, but a red exclamation mark appeared. I had blocked him. His hand trembled slightly, a wave of emptiness washing over him. Then he heard the voice in the video again. The interviewer asked, "If he pursued you again, would you forgive him?" "No," I replied softly but firmly. Jack's grip on his phone tightened, his jaw clenching. "She's lying," he muttered. "She still loves me. She has to." The day I returned to my home country, Jack met me at the airport, impeccably dressed and holding a bouquet of roses that drew attention. "Emma, welcome back," he said. I didn't accept the flowers. He frowned but took my suitcase naturally. "Ava, stop this nonsense," he said, using the nickname he hadn't called me in years. Once it might have softened me. Now it only left me puzzled. When I opened the car door, I saw Luna sitting inside. My expression darkened. Jack hurriedly explained, "Emma, I know you're upset about Luna ruining your birthday. I brought her here to apologize." Luna looked down, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry, sis. It's my fault. Please don't be angry with Jack." I stayed silent, watching the scene unfold. Jack reached for my hand, but I pulled away. With a sigh, he offered a compromise. "If you don't like her, I'll cut ties with her, okay?" Luna's face paled, her eyes wide with disbelief. "No need," I said, my voice flat. "Younger people have their strengths." Jack looked stunned. "What do you mean?" he asked. But before he could press further, a boy knocked on the car window. Sliding in beside me, he interlocked our fingers and said cheerfully, "Big sister, how could you leave me behind?" Jack's face darkened. "Who is this?" he demanded. The boy turned to me and grinned. "Ex-husband, bro," he said cheekily. I nodded, and his smile widened. "Hello, ex-husband, bro. I'm Noah, the little darling raised by my sister." Luna glared. "How shameless can you be?" Noah smirked. "I could say the same about you. Aren't you the ex-husband's little darling too?" Luna bristled. "This is different." "No," Noah retorted calmly. "You're the mistress in a marriage. That's what's truly shameless." Luna's face flushed with anger, and tears filled her eyes. She turned to Jack for support. But for once, he didn't even glance at her. "Let's go home," he said curtly. He said, "Take me to the apartment where I'm staying." With Noah pestering me to return home and nowhere else to go, I had no choice but to temporarily stay at my own place. Jack gripped the steering wheel tightly, his tone commanding. "Let's go home." "I want to talk to you," There was no room for negotiation in his voice. I frowned in irritation, but seeing the determination on his face, I nodded reluctantly. Okay, back at the villa, everything looked just as it had when I left, though slightly messier. After all, I had taken anything valuable with me when I moved out. As soon as we entered, Jack turned to me, his voice sharp. "Who is he?" Raising an eyebrow, I replied casually, "Just a little sweetheart. Didn't you once say you couldn't handle an open marriage? Now you've found yourself a younger man. How's that working out?" His sarcasm didn't go unnoticed as he looked at me with a faint smile, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of coldness. I smiled back, unbothered. "Quite well, actually. He's full of energy," I said, my words cutting through the tension. Jack's smirk faltered as my remark left him with nothing to say. His reaction made me impatient. "Is this really what you want to talk about?" I asked. "If so, I won't waste my time with you. Young people often get nightmares at night, and I need to be there for him." Jack's expression darkened. He clearly remembered saying those exact words to me in the past. He leaned closer, his voice low. "Emma, we've both cut ties with them. Can't we start fresh? The one I love is you." Pushing him away, I looked at him, weary. "You don't love me, Jack. You're just shaken because my leaving has bruised your ego. You've always been obsessive. Even as a child, you wouldn't eat a cookie if a piece was missing. Now, you'd rather chase after others than let me go, because it disrupts your perfect image of marriage. This isn't love, it's arrogance." Jack's face flushed with embarrassment, and he stormed out. Yet, the next morning, he was waiting outside my door, offering to drive me to work. I didn't refuse. After all, our divorce wasn't finalized, and we were still a respected couple in high society. Jack's attitude shifted. He began treating me with more care, sending frequent messages updating me on his every move. I didn't bother reading them, let alone replying. At the office, people addressed me as Madam, a reminder of my status. I wasn't interested in working a 9 to 5. With money at my disposal, I only held a nominal position, occasionally making appearances. Through friends at the company, I learned about Luna. One friend frequently stopped by my office, asking if Jack had truly changed. I would scoff at the suggestion. One evening, I invited her to dinner, texting Jack to let him know not to pick me up. His reply came swiftly. "Okay, I'll come after I'm done." On the drive to dinner, my friend asked, "Jack's done with Luna, right? He still cares about you. As long as you're upset, he won't be with her, no matter how much he likes her." I smiled faintly and replied, "Maybe." These days, Luna had been calling Jack often, but he never answered. Once, I told him to just pick up, as it might be important. He glanced at me with a complex expression, frustration mixed with sadness. "Don't you care?" he asked. I shook my head. "Not anymore." During dinner, my friend posed a serious question. "If Jack really changed, would you reconsider the divorce?" I didn't answer, my gaze drifting to the window. The sky was grey, and the streets were nearly empty. Under a street lamp, I spotted a tall figure. A girl ran out of an apartment and leaped into his arms. The man lowered his head, brushing a kiss against the corner of her eye. As a car's headlights illuminated them, I recognized their faces. Jack and Luna. Quietly, I captured the scene with my phone. Just then, Jack messaged me. "Are you done? I'll come pick you up." I replied, "Don't bother. I'm not coming back tonight." His response was immediate. "Okay." By midnight, my phone buzzed with a message from Luna. She sent a photo of Jack lying on her chest, her skin marked with his kisses. The accompanying text read, "Your husband is amazing, sis. He's over you, so stop clinging to him. Have some dignity." I saved the image and considered transferring her 52 cents with the note. Payment for services rendered. Instead, I forwarded the photo to my lawyer, labeling it as evidence of infidelity to secure a more favorable settlement. My lawyer's reply came quickly. "Don't worry, Emma." The next morning, Jack waited for me outside my building, looking refreshed and content. "Good morning, Emma," he greeted, holding my favorite soy milk and sesame buns. I took a few bites absent-mindedly, responding to his questions half-heartedly. My indifferent attitude seemed to unsettle him. Jack's expression grew darker. "Emma, are you really going to treat me this way?" he asked, pulling the car to a stop. His gaze softened, holding a tinge of disappointment, as if I had wronged him. But when our eyes met, calm and unwavering, he fell silent. "Just sign the divorce papers," I said coldly. "If you can't take it, don't endure it." Jack's face hardened. "Never. Don't even think about it," he said firmly. His resolute stance made me sigh. Leaning back in the seat, I felt both frustrated and resigned. "Jack, why do you have to be like this? When I loved you, you hurt me. Now that I don't, you won't let me go. It's exhausting." Despite his refusal to sign, Jack clung to me like a shadow. At the same time, he kept a watchful eye on Noah. Whenever Noah couldn't find me, he'd wait outside my office, grabbing my hand and asking, "Don't you care about me anymore?" I'd smile and assure him I did, before sending him off under the judgmental stares of onlookers. One evening, as rain fell and a chill settled in, Jack appeared at home with a container of lamb soup. "Didn't you say you wanted this? I went all the way across town to get it for you," he said, his hand cold against mine. His clothes were soaked, and his face was pale, but his eyes were filled with hope. I took a sip, then quietly put down the spoon. The taste was slightly fishy. "You drink it," I said, turning to leave, but Jack grabbed my wrist firmly. "I bought this just for you," he said, his voice tinged with frustration. It took me 2 hours to track down that tiny stall. The rain was pouring, and the place didn't even have a proper roof. "I waited in the rain just to bring this back to you. And you've only had one sip. Not even a word of concern. Emma, what's wrong with you?" His hand trembled slightly, his eyes filled with confusion. "You didn't used to be like this. So what?" I replied, meeting his gaze with a calm determination. "I haven't liked you for a long time. To me, you're just a stranger now. Why should I care about a stranger's efforts? Expecting gratitude from me? Isn't that absurd?" Jack's expression froze, shock spreading across his face. "How could you not like me?" he stammered. "I've looked into it. Noah is just your friend. There's nothing between you two. You're only using him to make me jealous. Deep down, you still care about me, right? Emma, Ava, you love me, don't you?" His tone was cautious, almost pleading, as his tightly clenched fists turned white. His desperation was palpable, as though my answer would determine his fate. I smiled faintly, shattering his last bit of hope. "We're just friends, Jack. Life is long. And one day, I'll meet someone I want to share it with. I fear loneliness, especially after my father passed away. I've always craved a home, a family. I never planned to live alone. I'll find a companion, whether it's a partner, a friend, or a lover. But it won't be you. Jack's eyes reddened, and he whispered, "Why can't it be me?" Without hesitation, I answered, "Because I don't want it to be." Ignoring the devastation on his face, I smiled faintly, turned, and walked away, never looking back. At that moment, Luna appeared, holding a pregnancy test report. Compared to the aloof and ethereal image she once had, her features now carried a charm shaped by love and experience, making her even more captivating. It wasn't surprising Jack couldn't let her go. Luna spoke with a slight smirk. "I'm pregnant." "Jack's only been nice to you because he wants you to accept this child. After all, you can't have children." My heart jolted. "Jack told you that?" I asked. Her smile grew more provocative. "Emma, everyone in our social circle knows you can't have kids. Who doesn't know?" I stayed composed, calmly sipping my tea. "It's not that I can't have children," I said softly. "It's that I refuse to have his. He doesn't deserve it. If you want to bear his child, that's your choice. Just don't involve me. If he wants a divorce, I'll sign the papers anytime. But he won't, will he? You two make a perfect pair, one cheap and the other even cheaper." Luna's face turned crimson with anger. "He loves me, not you. You're just an old woman," she spat. Raising my hand, I splashed tea in her face. Rising to my feet, I looked down at her disheveled state and said coldly, "If you're so sure he loves you, persuade him to sign the divorce papers. Stop wasting my time. I'll be waiting for the good news." Luna, however, lacked the ability to sway Jack. She confronted him with the pregnancy test, her demeanor soft and hopeful, like that of a new mother. But Jack's first response was to glance at me and say, "Emma, this was an accident." Luna froze, stunned. Regaining her composure, she gripped Jack's arm tightly. "Jack, you told me you wanted a child with me. You said you hoped the baby would be as beautiful as I am. How can you call this an accident? You love me, don't you? You're tired of Emma. Why won't you leave her? What can she give you? I love you, and we're having a child. Why won't you marry me?" Her voice quivered with desperation, but Jack's expression remained icy. "Get rid of it," he said coldly. Luna instinctively covered her stomach, her eyes filling with anguish. "No, I won't. This is our child. How can you say that?" Her cries were heart-wrenching, but Jack's gaze didn't waver. "I won't say it again. Get rid of it." Luna screamed, covering her ears as if to block out his words. Exhausted, she eventually fainted. Jack had her taken to the hospital, then turned to me. "Emma, I'll handle this." "I'm sorry." I was momentarily stunned, then burst into laughter. "No need, I don't care," I replied. My indifference seemed to strike him deeply. "Do you really not care?" he asked, his voice shaky. I looked him in the eye. "Jack, we're divorcing. Your affairs, your children. None of it concerns me anymore. I don't love you, I haven't for a long time." Seeing his trembling hands and disoriented state, I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. "Just sign the papers," I said. Reluctantly, Jack finally signed. Luna's pregnancy had already made headlines, causing a scandal that shook the upper echelons of society. The stock market was in turmoil, and shareholders were openly dissatisfied. Jack couldn't risk a lawsuit from me, especially with his affair public knowledge. My lawyer secured a favorable settlement, 60% of the assets, with Jack voluntarily giving up an additional 10%. I accepted it with a calm heart. Walking out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, light rain fell once again. Rain seemed to mark every significant moment of my life. Our engagement, marriage, Jack's first affair, and now our divorce. Jack stood beside me, whispering, "Let me take you home." I shook my head. No need. Someone's coming to pick me up. As I spoke, Noah appeared, slipping between Jack and me. "Sister, I'm here. It's cold today. Wear more layers," he exclaimed, draping his coat over my shoulders. I accepted it without hesitation and stepped under his umbrella. The rain stopped suddenly, and sunlight broke through the clouds, warming the chill in the air. I smiled, turning to wave at Jack. "Goodbye," I said simply. Jack stood frozen, watching me walk away with Noah. For the first time, he understood that I wouldn't turn back. She had said it herself. If you love someone, be with them. If not, let go. That day, Jack stood in the rain, watching as I left, my life now bright and unburdened, like a sky cleared after a storm. He realized too late that he had lost something irreplaceable. While I walked toward a new future, he remained behind, drenched in regret.